Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. So welcome. I think I recognize almost everybody, but I'll give an introduction of myself regardless. My name is Ferox. I am a 33-year-old Buddhist lay disciple of the Theravada tradition. And being a Buddhist lay disciple, what that means is I'm just a regular guy. I'm not a monk, a monastic. I'm not a guru or a master or anything like that. What we do here is every week we have a discussion. Now, it kind of follows the traditional Dhamma talk way, in that I usually talk, I have the first half hour to talk. It doesn't always, last a half hour, and the second half hour is usually questions and discussion. It's traditional when a monk talks that you hold off your questions to the end, but since I'm not a monk and I'm not a particular fan of that, you can feel free to comment and ask questions as we go along. Never worry about making a comment or asking a question. So what I wanted to speak today is about Pancasila, or the 5 precepts. Is there anybody here who is following the 5 precepts currently? Welcome, Bas. Anybody else? Good. I like that. Because that means that this talk can help. So, the tradition, at least in Theravada, I can't claim to know too much about the traditions of the Mahayana, but at least the tradition of quote-unquote becoming a Buddhist involves 2 things. It involves taking refuge in the Triple Gem. I take refuge in the Buddha, I take refuge in the Dhamma, I take refuge in the Sangha. But it also involves taking on the 5 precepts. And we will go over the 5 precepts a little bit in detail as we go along, but what I wanted to discuss about the 5 precepts was that the 5 precepts are not like the 10 Commandments or anything in Judeo-Christian faith. It's not something that is a hard and fast rule or commandment that you have to do, or else you're going to go to the 7 hells and all these kind of things, or you have to confess it to a monk. What Pancasila is, or Panchasila, is training rules. And what you do when you take these 5 precepts is that you take them upon yourself. They're not given to you, per se, although traditionally, as part of the Pali chanting, the lay practitioner requests it from the monk. And then the monk can recite it with the lay practitioners.
Wake up.
So, but one thing I wanted to explain is that they are, like I said, they're training rules, and they're something that you take upon yourself. You don't have to have a monk give them to you, because they're not given. They're rules that are something that you feel that you are that you want to abide by, to live by. So what are those rules? I'll post a link for everybody to keep for their own edification. Access to Insight, a great website as always, Panchasila. So the 5 rules are, and you'll see some of them have a lot in correlation with different parts of different commandments from the Judeo-Catholic faith. I undertake the training rule to not destroy, to refrain from destroying living creatures. Or, in short, no killing. Of course, that's a pretty simple one. I mean, we all kind of like, hey, yeah, we don't kill. But, you know, the difference between thou shalt not kill and the Ten Commandments and I will refrain from killing any living creatures in the precepts is that any living creatures means any living creatures. That means even creatures that you don't like bugs and spiders and snakes and bears, oh my. Because it's all part of what the training, you know, what we do with metta meditation is we're developing equanimity, loving kindness for all beings, regardless of their form. So part of that training rule is to not kill any living being. Now, I want to clarify that in terms of what exactly is meant by killing. In the precepts here, when they say not refrain from killing a living being, killing is volitional in Buddhism. Whereas, as an example, if you're walking down the street, you don't know how many creatures that you've killed. Microscopic creatures, little bugs that you don't see. Just in your living, just in your moving, you kill creatures. So did you break the 5 precepts in that? Not necessarily, no. There's no intention to destroy those creatures. So it's not something that you broke the precepts on that. It's all about volition, about intention. Now, what happens if you kill a bug? Are you going to the hells? Or whatever, you know, whichever, the hungry ghost or all the negative 32 dimensions, the parts of the 32 dimensions, I should say. Welcome, Savannah. It's not something that, the training rules are not something that meant to be punitive, where there's no guilt in Buddhism, and there's no confession either. The only confession that I know about is that every month the monks do get together to confess any rules that they've broken. There's no such thing in Buddhism as regular people going to monks for confession. At least, like I said, I'm from Theravada, so I can't, you know, I can't talk about the Mahayana and Zen and all of that, but as far as I know, there's no such thing like that. What you're doing here in following the precepts is not like a child following rules. Like, oh, I have to follow these rules for my own good. What you're doing is you're living a moral life to enhance your meditation and to enhance your practice, because the Buddha talks about how morality, sila, is near as important as panna, wisdom, and samadhi, which is concentration or meditation. Those 3 things are important. Samadhi, panna, and sila. They all go together. As a matter of fact, the Noble Eightfold Path is split into those 3 divisions. So what you're doing here with the precepts is taking on these rules on your own and attempting to live by them as best as you can in order to progress along the path of Dhamma. That's what the precepts are all about. So if you break one of these precepts, you know, don't feel, oh, I gotta start all over again. I gotta go to the monk and I gotta get, you know, do the chanting again and get the precepts again. And no, you don't have to do that. Now, You can get the precepts at any time. In fact, if you go to retreats and stuff like that, they'll often give the precepts. So it's something that you'll probably recite, or you'll receive often, but it's not something that you should feel like you need to get again if you fail, or if you don't follow the rules to the letter. So the second precept, again, which should be fairly common to us, is refraining. I take the rule to refrain from taking what is not given. Or, put in simple terms, thou shalt not steal. This is a fairly easy one to understand. Taking what is not given. Now, in today's society, it gets a little complicated too, because on Dhamma Wheel, which is a good Theravada Buddhist website with a lot of very insightful people, they're debating right now is file sharing breaking the second precept, downloading videos and music and all this kind of stuff. And so it's an interesting thing to watch them debate back and forth. I personally came to my own conclusion through my own insight that it is, and I've, as somebody who downloaded videos and music and movies a lot in the past, I basically decided not to do it anymore. So it's part of what I follow as my second precept. Now, what I wrote in there as my response to that, and what I suggest to everybody else, is that this is something that you have to come up through your own insight about. Is it stealing? Is it not stealing? And it brings up a good point with the precepts, in that everything in life doesn't necessarily fit nice and neat within the 5 precepts of what you need to do. There's always gray areas. There's nothing black and white. So what you have to do is make decisions based on your own insight, your own gut, and what you feel is right according to the 5 precepts, if you're following the 5 precepts. So the next one is, again, a fairly obvious one. Actually, no, I'm wrong. It can be complicated as well. I take down the rule to refrain from sexual misconduct. And people are like, oh boy, what's sexual misconduct? Well, this again is a little debated. But from what I've read, from what I've gathered, and what makes most sense to me in my practice, is that sexual misconduct is any kind of sexual act done without consent, or that harms yourself or others. The Buddha, also talks about how, in terms of sexual misconduct, not lying with those who are still under the care of their kin, or which would be brothers, sisters, aunt, uncle, mother, father. So basically minors. So any sexual activity, at least for lay people, that is not harmful to yourself or to the other person, and is done with full consent of both people as adults, is fine. It doesn't fall under sexual misconduct. But again, this is something that you also have to see through your own insight, and to, each situation is different. The main subject, or the main example that's used a lot is is adultery. I mean, that's, it's also been translated as no adultery. So obviously, if you're committing adultery, if you're married or the other person's married, you're not only hurting whoever's married, you're not only hurting that person's spouse, but you're really hurting that person and yourself, because you're creating a situation in which, families can be destroyed and multiple people are harmed from this. So that makes sense. Another one is rape. Obviously, that makes perfect sense in that, the one person is not consenting. You're physically abusing another person. So that makes sense as well. Encarnacion just also made a good point in terms of using sex for control of another person. While that person can be, that's a little bit of a gray area, because you can see why using sex for control of another person can definitely be abusive mentally. Even if the person is consenting. So that's an interesting one. I've never come across that one, Encarnacion. That's definitely one that I'd like to think about in terms of that. But that is one that is not necessarily so obvious. It's like a subtle form of something that is not beneficial. So that's a very interesting. Now, if somebody, I just want to answer the question here. So before we go, if someone stole something and then gave it to you, is that different according to you, knowing or not knowing? If you don't know, then there's no intention. I mean, it's kind of like receiving stolen goods. I mean, I guess legally, unless you can prove 100% that you really didn't know, if you received stolen goods, you're probably going to at least go to court for it. But the human court is different than the court, the volitional court, the court of action, of Dhamma. So, I mean, if you really truly didn't know that something was stolen and it was given to you freely, then I don't see that as breaking the rule. Otherwise, it can, to a varying amounts of a degree, break that rule too. Accepting what is not given. So you can read it as not taking what is not given. Okay. If the person who stole it gave it to you, you're technically not stealing it because it was given to you. However, if you know that it was stolen, you're in a way stealing it from the person as well as the person who stole it from you. See what I mean? Even something so simple can become very complicated. And this is why it's always up to us to use our own insight, our own gut feeling about these things, and to come out and to make our own decisions about these things. So any questions on the sexual misconduct at all? And that's fairly simple, but as Encarnacion pointed out, it can be also pretty complicated. No, that was great. It made me think, because I had not thought about something like that before. So definitely, this is what this is all about. I'm just not here to spout words out, especially because I'm no master or guru, like I say. So when somebody makes a good comment, it has to be talked about. I enjoy that. Okay. Yep. Okay, so the fourth one Oh, this one can be very, very complicated. I take the training rule to refrain from incorrect speech or lying. Put it simply, but this also encapsulates stuff like gossiping. Speech that is incorrect speech is really the best term, or unskillful speech is really the best term to encapsulate everything that involves this. Harsh speech, gossiping, lying, all of these actions of speech that we do that are not necessarily beneficial to us or beneficial to others, that might hurt us or might hurt others. So we want to do our best to refrain from that. And again, it is as simple as lying, but then you can start to debate, okay, well, another interesting debate I've seen is regarding lying is the people who lied to the Nazis to save Jewish people in World War II. Did they break the third or the precept? Was that unskillful? And people debate that back and forth. But obviously, I think for most people, we don't need to be intellectuals to understand that even though it's technically lying, it was done for the benefit of beings. But see, that can be complicated as well, and so not all things are so obvious. And you can start saying, "Oh, it's done for the benefit of beings," and is it really done for the benefit of beings? So it can be a slippery slope, per se. But the basics is, of this is just to refrain from false speech, from gossiping. Gossiping is something that, in a lot of ways, we don't necessarily see as bad. We, in our offices, in our life, we do see, there's people like, oh, they're backstabbers. They'll talk behind your back and this and that. But then you'll start, doing the water cooler talk. Like, oh, did you hear about this? What happened there? What happened there? And that's all considered wrong speech or incorrect speech, because it's harmful to not only others, but it can be also harmful to yourself. And the Buddha would say that this is just a waste of time as well. You could be meditating instead of wasting your time gossiping about who's going out with who and all of these things that have no little meaning. Yes, incarcerated. Yes, I agree. Things that are demotivate others, things that bashing other people, saying you can't, you're not good, or you're not, you can't do this or that. Definitely, all incorrect speech. The Buddha. I don't want to go too deep into this because we could do a whole talk on speech itself. But the Buddha has multiple times where there's two things. He talks about two separate times and two separate ways. What ways are the best for correct speech? And it talks about, is it a fact? Is it beneficial to yourself or others? Is it said at the right time? And we're not going to go too deep into that because we don't have the time here. But it can become a very complicated subject. And last but not least, the one that people seem to have the most issues with in terms of when they take the precepts. So since we're coming close to the end here, I'll put that link. And that is, I undertake the training rule to refrain from the use of intoxicants, or any liquid or food or anything that causes heedlessness, drinks, drugs, etc. So people say, oh my God, I can't ever drink again? Well, this is another one where technically no, although I have known people who have the five precepts, and they don't see a reason why they can't have a beer every once in a while, because a beer in itself is not going to cause heedlessness. Now, well, see, that can be interesting. I don't necessarily know that video gaming or Second Life would necessarily fall under an actual precept per se. I mean, obviously, it would fall under an attraction, a craving, an addiction kind of a thing. But I'm not necessarily sure if it would fall under taking things, because this precept has to do with something that changes your body, through ingesting of it. Whereas, I don't necessarily know that coffee causes heedlessness, or that it's something that, like, when they say heedlessness, they mean something that causes you to act in otherwise ways that you wouldn't if you were clear-headed. And they want you to keep a clear head. The part of this is not only so that you avoid anything that you might do while you're under these states, but also because the practice is you're always supposed to be mindful. You're practicing mindfulness at all times. And you can't be mindful when you're sloshed out of your brain. Believe me, I went to college and I drank a lot, so I know all about that. You definitely can't be mindful. I was more mindful than most. But even still, you can't be fully mindful when you have drugs or alcohol or stuff like that in your head. And what I mean is, I think maybe it went off a little on a tangent when I said foods. I don't necessarily mean, like spaghetti or something like that. There's certain foods and certain things that do cause heedlessness in different cultures and stuff like that. So that's why I added that. We're not talking about just regular eating. Well, exactly. Special brownies, yeah. Yeah. So, it's one of those things, as I said 4 or 5 times, already, that is taking one beer going to cause heedlessness? Not necessarily. Is that breaking the precepts? That's up to you. I don't necessarily know that it is. For me personally, through my own insight and through my own gut feeling, I just don't drink. When I took the precepts, okay, if I'm fine, I'm not going to drink anymore. It doesn't, I rarely drank as it is. Like I said, I never drank until college, but just like the regular college kid, I drank a lot in college, and so once I got out of college, it was like, it's out of my system. I had a pina colada every once in a while, so it's like by the time I took the precepts, I'm like, I drink like a pina colada once or twice a year. What's the point anyway? It's like, it's not like, to me, it's not like a loss. You know what I mean? It's something that's easy. Other people, it might not be so easy. So it really depends. The thing about Buddhism itself, the thing about the practice following the precepts, it's a very personal journey. And nobody can really tell you exactly how you need to do it. The Buddha himself said he can only show the way. He cannot lead you down that path. So, it's always good to take advice and to listen to the insight and the wisdom of teachers. But in the end, they can't bring you down that path either. You have to do it. So you have to know, you have to follow these precepts if you want to follow the precepts, through your own insight, through your own feelings, through your own intuition, and make decisions and perform actions as you go along. So for those of you who are actually interested in taking the 5 precepts, that is something, like I said, that you can do on your own. You don't need a monk, and you don't need to go through the Pali, the Pali chanting and all of that to take the precepts. If you'd like to, of course, you could take the precepts by any of the monastics here at Buddhist Center. It's a fairly quick service. Or if you can have it. They usually do it like on Wesic, or it's spelled Vesic days, which is the day that we celebrate the birth, the enlightenment, and the parinibbana, or passing away, of the Buddha. And that's when I took mine, going on about 5 years ago. I took the refuge and the precepts on Wesic 5 years ago. So, different places will offer usually on that day. Or you can, request it from a monk at any time. So those are your options, and it is something that some people will say, you're not a Buddhist unless you are following the 5 precepts. And to a certain degree, I agree. But on the other hand, everybody is at a different level. You shouldn't feel forced, like you have to take the 5 precepts. This was not something that, I don't have a teacher in my daily life. I don't have a monastery, or I don't have monks that I see in my daily life. I have, the nearest monasteries are 2 or 3 or 4 or 5 hours from me. So it's one of those things where, for me, I knew I was ready. And I went to the monastery specifically because I wanted to take the precepts. It wasn't that, as a monk said, if you're going to be hanging around here, you better take the precepts. No, it's not like that. So, if you are serious about the practice, it's something that will eventually come up. It's something that you'll eventually want to do, because you'll see that, and what the Buddha said about how the more morality you have, the more clear your mind, the easier it is for meditation. So, and the better you're able to meditate, the more you see things as they really are, and you change your actions. So it's all connected, and it all goes hand in hand. You can't become enlightened. You can't be a master meditator without some sort of sila, some sort of morality as well. At least not in Buddhism. So I think that's pretty much the talk. If there's any questions or comments at this point, if you want to discuss anything, we can definitely do that as well. Prescription drugs. Okay, Gideon, this is a good question. Anything that's considered medicine is not breaking the precepts, even if it does make you loopy. And I know these drugs. I in my job, I deal with people who are on medications all the time, and I know that well, medical marijuana. I mean, if it helps medically, I guess technically, even though it does kind of make you, it does kind of cause heedlessness. If it's used for medication, see, that's a gray area. That's interesting. You'll get answers on both sides. You'll definitely will. Now, it's not. Now, we wouldn't, the whole marijuana thing, and the drugs and all that. Remember, back in the Buddha's day, there were no FDAs and drug enforcement administrations and drugs are bad and illegal kind of things. These are not, this is not like the Buddha saying, ooh, you're bad if you take drugs. This is, the Buddha saying that if you're developing the path, if you're going along the practice, you're developing mindfulness. Taking these things will not help you. So the medical marijuana thing, there's no judgment, at least as far as I'm concerned, in terms of the illegality or legality or whatever of it. It's just about the heedlessness. So although it causes heedlessness, and if it helps somebody, for me personally, I would consider it medicine. But I'm no monastic scholar. So, and I'm sure there would be monks on either end that would say different things. So that would be an interesting debate. But I don't know if I can, like I said, me personally, it's medicine. If used in that regard. You know what I mean? But no, medications, drugs that, now, if you have Percocet and you got a lot of pain, I would probably recommend something else, by the way, because then you'll get addicted. But if you take a Percocet for pain, that's not breaking the precepts. If you start taking Percocets because you like what the Percocets do to you, then that's starting to break the precepts. But again, it's not like you better go confess it to the monk or something like that. It's not like that. You realize on your own that it's something that is not beneficial to you when used in that way. It's the same thing. Things can be medicine. Like the monks actually have something called the medicine meal. If you're sick or if you're working a lot, you can have an extra meal. It's permitted to the monks, and it's for medicinal purpose. Even though technically the rules officially say you're not supposed to eat after 12. If you're sick or if you're working, doing a lot of physical work, then you can have extra meals for medicine. So it works in the same way. Well, yeah, Incarnation, but when I was adding on to the medication is people, the number one abused drug in my country right now, America, is prescription pills. People use that more than they do illegal drugs. So what I mean is you can use that for something other than pain. It's for heedlessness. So that's something that you'd want to avoid. To do it for that purpose. Of course, the lines get merged there. It's a very gray, complicated area. Because you can be like you can have pain, but you can also want it for the heedlessness as well. So then it's like, oh, where is the line drawn? It's not drawn. I don't think there's really ever a line drawn. It's always something that you have to go with your gut. And that's actually a whole other topic, trusting your gut. It's something that I do all the time, and I've always done for some reason. That depends. Where is your heart and your gut can almost be the same thing. When I say go with your gut, it's something that it's like you have an intuition. There's something that's just telling you to do this. And some people, it might be hard to listen to it, but or not. They might not hear it, but it's just something that's saying this is the right thing to do. And there's been times in my life, I do it on a small basis every day, but there's been times in my life where I just know that my intuition, my gut's saying to do this, and I did it. Because I just know that that was the right way to go. I mean, that's just me personally. I don't know. Other people's guts might not be so beneficial. I have no idea. The other people's intuition, but like the same thing every morning before work. I go to work, and on the grounds there, I do my meditation. I do walking meditation, and I do sitting meditation, and I don't check the time at all. And when I'm doing my walking meditation, my intuition says, okay, it's time to do sitting meditation. And then I go do the sitting meditation. And I try to, uh, God, interesting. See, there's a couple mixed things when it comes to uh, God in Buddhism. In the Buddhist cosmologies, there are deities, which are supernatural beings, although they are just beings. They are not immortal, they are not omnipotent, and they are, there's a multitude of them. There's devas, and there's demons, yaks I think they're called. There's all kinds of deities. Now, well, I'm gonna just to skip ahead real quick. I'm gonna talk about a little bit about what the heart, following your heart, and if that's connected to emotions or not, because that can be a bad thing. But going back to the God thing, do Theravadists believe in a creator God? No. But the Buddha doesn't say that explicitly. The Buddha says he teaches suffering, or dukkha, and the cessation of dukkha. To the Buddha, is there a God, is there not a God? It's an imponderable. Why bother even, why bother with it? Why try to find out? You're not going to find out. It's imponderable. Just like karma, the workings of karma is an imponderable. The beginning of the universe, the beginning of all time, is an imponderable. So the Buddha's saying, deal with something that's right here with you right now, and that's suffering. And this is the way out of suffering. So you're not going to find anything in the sutras that say, the Buddha says, there's no God, and you're stupid if you believe in one. There's no such thing. There's no such sutta. I'm not a master or scholar of the suttas, but I certainly have not come across anything that says something like that. Now, there's plenty of places where the Buddha talks about analyzing, like how am I going black? Kalama Sutta, where he talks about not believing or not trusting in anything simply because you heard it or somebody told you or your teacher said this or that. And also in another sutta he talks about being I believe it's a goldsmith, about how you are always analyzing, as the goldsmith analyzes the gold or the jewels, you're always analyzing things. So he's not necessarily talking, he's saying not to just believe stuff blindly, but he's also not saying there's no God, don't be stupid. And to be honest with you, at the Buddha's time, monotheism in terms of what we know as Judeo-Christian didn't necessarily exist. Zoroastrian, as far as we know, is the first historical monotheistic religion, and that's at the time of not the Byzantines. Trying to think. It might predate the Buddha. I'm not sure. It might be around the same time, but it wasn't something that was very common like it is in the West today. So that you have these debates: is there a God? Is there not a God? The Buddha in the suttas, they talk about the cosmologies, and there's not one creature, there's not one being that is all knowing and immortal. All things are impermanent. The only thing that is not permanent, the only thing that is permanent is impermanence. Even the universe itself. And the Buddha also talks about how there was no beginning and no end to all things, to the universe. So there's no point in thinking about it. Which is interesting because it kind of fits with a lot of the newer the astrophysics, talking about the multiverses and how, you know, apparently they believe that universes, the big bangs are happening all the time, and there's innumerable amounts of universes all in this multiverse that is, you know, forever. It was never created. There's no beginning. There's no end to this multiverse. So it's kind of interesting how science is kind of connecting with Buddhism in this modern times. But I guess it's one of those things where I personally think that to a point somebody could be a Catholic and a Buddhist at the same time. You know, and I think that eventually you will start to question things if you really start going down the path. And when you start developing insight, you'll start to really say, do I really believe this or do I not believe this? But everybody is at a different point in the path. And I don't see most people, or at least I personally wouldn't say, you can't be a Catholic and a Buddhist at the same time. That's stupid. You know, why would you, if you say you're Buddhist, why do you believe in such things? You can't, that's not how to be. And that goes against what the Buddha's teaches about not judging and not comparing. So each person is on their own path. And while each person can gain insight and can gain help from other people, like I said, they're on their own path. They can only follow it themselves. That's interesting. Well, before I answer that, I just want to hearts have their own brain and consciousness. Interesting. I will put that in my browser to check that out. But the one thing that I do, going back to the whole heart thing, thinking with your heart, I don't want to sound too Spockish or Borgish to use some Star Trek references, because there's not really other references in pop culture where you think of people saying don't use emotions. But thinking with your emotions can be dangerous, because it's, again, your emotions can cloud your judgment, cloud your actions, and it's almost like being heedless. Really, it's almost like taking a drug that makes you heedless. Now, that's not to say that your emotions should be negated, or that you should say bad emotions and try to push them somewhere. Just like you're observing in meditation, you're observing all things, including your emotions. But you don't want to make rash actions depending on your emotions. There's the Buddha. There's one sutta where the Buddha talks to his son Rahula about how you should think before you speak, and that's something that, you know, we're taught as kids. You know, there's an old rule for people who are, when you're doing like woodworking, it's measure twice, cut once. And I'm pretty sure I haven't heard this said. It might be something that I came up with, I don't know, but it's probably been said before. I always say, think twice, talk once. So you're always thinking twice before you say something. Well, it makes sense, at least for me anyway. I can see that going the other way as well. I can see that making sense. But let's see the last question. Will everyone achieve enlightenment eventually? You know, as far as I can see in the Theravada, they don't really talk about that much. In the Mahayana, they talk about everybody having Buddha nature, and stuff like that. Whereas, like, pretty much everybody's already enlightened. You just have to clear away all of the crap that we add on to it. And Theravada kind of speaks in that same way too, in that everything is, what's there is already there. We're not striving. We're not trying to go somewhere to be enlightened. We're trying to let go. It's almost like the Atlas who's holding the world. We're walking around holding this world, and all we need to do is know how to let go and put it down. And for us, it's, for humans, it's we're holding on to these wrong views, these attachments, these aversions, all of these things that the Buddha talks about. And when we let go of all of these things, that's enlightenment, that's nibbana. So it's not something that you gain. It's about losing. It's about letting go. And actually, letting go is a whole topic that I'm thinking about discussing. Maybe I'll do that next week. So, will everybody be enlightened eventually? I don't know if I can even answer that, to be honest with you. A lot of the teachers, they talk about, helping others, and can you help yourself, or can you help others if you can't help yourself? And a lot of people talk about not forcing help on other people, because people are at different varying levels. Like there's some people in my life that I know would benefit from meditation, from Buddhist teaching, but I know in my talks with them and previous attempts that they're just not ready for that. They might be 10 eons down the road, and how many other lives, extra whatever, down the road they might be ready for it, but they're not ready for it now. So that's one of the reasons why Buddhism is not an evangelical belief. It's not something that everybody can do right here and now. Everybody can believe. Not everybody's ready. They might be ready eventually. So who knows? And I've thought about this too. Well, is there a time? What would it be like if samsara is completely destroyed and all there are untold amounts of beings that are enlightened? What would that be like? You know what that smacks to me? Imponderable. Imponderable. That's what it smacks to me. It's almost like I don't know why even think about it. Maybe if and then they debate, are enlightened beings around after they become enlightened, and it's like, like you can't know. So what's the point to it? Some people, and it also depends on the different schools. I think that in the Mahayana, it's a little bit more like with the Bodhisattvas and stuff, that the Buddhas are still around and they help you, and you can ask for stuff from them. And in the Theravada, the Buddha's gone. The Buddha's parinirvana. You can't pray to him. You can't wish for anything from him. So it depends a lot on the school too. So I don't necessarily. So I guess I didn't answer your question, but on the other hand, I don't necessarily think it can be answered. So I guess if there's any final comments or questions, I'll we can talk about that, or we can head out. One of the things that I could probably also do a whole other talk on is letting go of these imponderables. Now, I'm a very intellectual type person too. I'm a very, like, I need to know these. Like, that's why I love learning about the universe so much, because I want to know. Like, I want to know all these things. And there's just all these things that we will never know. And if you can learn to let go of the attachment to want to know all of these things, it's a big help in furthering your practice. Now, see, it can also go the other way. You also don't want to just believe in whatever, just follow whatever somebody tells you either. There's a mix there. You want to examine, and you want to try to understand. But there's certain things that with our human mind or with our human experience that we're limited to. I'd love to wonder what it's like when eventually humans are traveling through space. I ain't gonna live that long. Maybe if I'm still reborn or whatever. If I go through rebirth that far ahead, maybe I'll be a spacefaring guy or whatever. But it's not. It's something that I always grew up wanting to know. Oh man, I wish I would know. Like that's why I always wanted to be immortal. Like so I can find out what's gonna happen in 500 or 600 years. But now I just realize it's an attachment, something that I want to know, something that beyond my human mind cannot know. Okay, well, I guess until next time, much metta and Sukhi Hantu. May you all be happy.